Hey, welcome back to Slow Bells. Today I'm in Detour Village, Michigan. This is kind of in the general area where Lake Huron ends and Lake Michigan begins. I've been in Canada for a couple months now, and Bob and I just cleared back into the USA through customs yesterday. Today I'm going to show you the portion of the trip from through Georgian Bay and the North Channel. This is after the Port Severn waterway and before the trip down Lake Michigan to Chicago. So check it out. When you pop out of the Port Severn waterway, you end up about here at Port Severn. If you were in a hurry to reach Chicago, I suppose you could do something like this. But there is an exceptionally beautiful shoreline along the northern shore of Lake Huron. So it is common for loopers to check out this shoreline, then either cruise down the east or west coast of Lake Michigan. The northern shore of Lake Huron is often considered to be made up of two sections. Georgian Bay, located here, is sort of considered to be the eastern section, and the North Channel, located here, is the western part. The town of Killarney is located in the middle here. Cruisers in this area typically have a set of fairly detailed paper charts that they take with them. These charts are seldom used for actual navigation. The modern chart plotters have pretty much taken over the job of en route navigation. The reason the paper charts are handy is for overall planning in general and anchorages in particular. The northern shore of Georgian Bay is sometimes referred to as the 30,000 island area, and in that collection of islands is a huge number of potential anchoring spots. Everyone has their own favorites. I have developed an electronic chart mentality, and I don't carry any paper charts on my boat. Some do and some don't. It's a personal choice with the usual list of advantages and disadvantages. In Georgian Bay, the advantage of having paper charts is when a boating friend or a marina manager starts telling you about their favorite anchorages. Someone like me is at a big disadvantage here, since about all I can do is take notes. Bob and I did this, and we later found out that it was just about impossible to go back and find the anchorages we had been told about. You have 30,000 places to search, and some of these islands and channels and bays don't even have names on my electronic charts. If you have paper charts and someone volunteers to point out some favorite anchorages, you can record those recommended anchorages right on your chart. Bob and I cruised through this area with electronic charts. To identify anchorages, we used our notes and a Great Loop cruising guide and Active Captain and Navionics to find our anchorages. But I'm sure we missed some cool anchorages by not having paper charts to mark anchorages that were recommended by other people. Another thing I want to mention is internet access in Canada. As a boater from the USA, I came to Canada with my USA internet devices provided by Verizon. I had a fairly new cell phone and a fairly old hotspot, each with their own individual telephone numbers. My hotspot did not work in Canada. The cell phone was sometimes able to connect to the internet, and other times I was offline. When I could connect to the internet, the connection was usually slow for two reasons. The first problem was signal strength, which was often weak. The second reason was that in Canada, Verizon switched me from relatively fast download speeds to relatively slow download speeds after I used up my daily high-speed data allowance of half a gigabyte. If you are watching videos on the internet, it doesn't take long to burn through that half gigabyte daily allowance. I passed through here in the summer of 2019, and hopefully the internet access will improve over time. After Bob and I left the last lock on the Trent Severn waterway, it was less than a couple hours to Bay Port Marina in Midland, Ontario. We spent 3 days there doing grocery shopping, boat chores, laundry, and enjoying restaurant food. This marina was one of those places that had briefings on where to anchor your boat in Georgian Bay. After that, Bob and I headed out along the northern shore of Georgian Bay using basically the no plan, trying out different anchorages and enjoying the beautiful scenery. Overall, we enjoyed the anchorages, but there was one anchorage that turned out to be sort of a pain in the ass. After anchoring, a retired couple motored by in their fishing boat and complained that we had anchored too close to their hydro, which I figured out was submerged power cables running to the house that they had on the shoreline of our anchorage. These hydro lines were shown on my chart, and they were in no danger of being disturbed by our anchor. But to keep things friendly, I told them I would be happy to re-anchor a little further away from their hydro lines. Then they told us they would really prefer us to find another little bay to anchor in. They felt my boat was intruding on their privacy. We did move our anchor a bit further from their underwater electrical cables, but we did not leave the little bay. A while later, a gal paddled her kayak out to Slow Bells and presented Bob with a document sealed in plastic called the Cottager's Code. I am very skeptical that this document carries any legal weight, but I can't really say for sure if it is enforceable. I later read the document, and item 2 states that boaters are supposed to anchor out of sight of cottages whenever possible. Apparently, the cottage owners feel that they not only own the land, but also the view from their land as well. I have toured Canada from British Columbia to Newfoundland by powerboat, sailboat, and motorcycle, and this was the only unfriendly group of Canadians I can ever remember encountering. It definitely gave a bad smell to what was otherwise a beautiful area. I was doing my morning engine room checks one day and discovered why my generator had been making some peculiar noises the past several days. A set screw had lost its grip on a pulley. The pulley was pulled out of alignment with the water pump shaft, and that allowed the pulley to start chewing on my generator's water pump housing. This basically put the generator out of action, and that basically puts the refrigerator out of action for all practical purposes. As luck would have it, we were headed to Wright's Marina in Britt, Ontario that day. We ended up staying there a week until a replacement water pump and pulley could be shipped to us at the marina. Once I had a new water pump and pulley, it was an easy fix, and we were on our way once again the following day. We departed Wright's Marina on a cloudy Saturday morning and headed to the anchorage in Bad River. As we were approaching the anchorage, I made a dangerously clumsy navigational error. Before I can tell you what went wrong, you have to understand two chart symbols first. The first symbol represents a small craft channel. It is a magenta line and shows you where you can safely take your boat. The second symbol is a range. made up of two markers on land. If you position your boat so the markers line up in front of you, you will be in the deepest part of the channel. It is not unusual for these two symbols to be seen together. Here's an example. Let's say you have rocks and shoals here, and let's add a few buoys here, and let's add a range here. Finally, let's add the small craft channel line here. So to go through this area, you would follow the range and the buoys through the small craft channel like this. It is important to notice this point. The small craft channel leaves the range at this point and continues around those pesky islands. This spot where the magenta small craft channel leaves the range line is what I will call the very important transition spot. Okay, have you got all that? On the approach to Bad River, here is what you will see. The magenta small craft channel follows the range toward the anchorage. The very important transition spot is here. But instead of the magenta small craft channel line doing something like this, that magenta line just kind of disappears at the very important transition spot. For some reason, I guess the chart makers figured you didn't really need that magenta small craft channel line to follow anymore between this point and the actual anchorage. My error was that I was so focused on following that line, I did not notice that it had turned from the magenta small craft channel line to the black range line that is drawn through those two range markers on dry land. That black line was taking me right towards shallow water, and if I followed the black line long enough, it would take me to the dry land where the two range markers were located. I missed the importance of the subtle difference in line color at that very important transition point. Fortunately, Bob saved the day. He called my attention to the fact that we were passing on the wrong side of this green marker. If not for Bob, I could have easily driven my boat right into the rocky shallows. So the three important things I need to remember are magenta line, good. Black line, bad. Channel buoys, good. Despite my best attempts to destroy my boat, we managed to anchor safely in Bad River, and it was really a beautiful spot. No doubt about it, this is a granite-rich environment. Some of the rocks along the shoreline have steel rings pounded into the rock to help you tie up your boat. In this area, it is not uncommon to have the front of your boat held in place by your anchor somewhere out there in the water, and have the stern of your boat held in place by a rope running from the stern to some tie-off point along the rocky shoreline. After leaving the Bad River anchorage the next morning, we passed through an area known as Collins Inlet. It's a little narrow at the east end, but becomes wider as you go further west, and passes through some beautiful scenery that is also a granite-rich environment. This swing bridge in the town of Little Current is 100 years old. It started out as a railroad bridge and is now a single-lane highway bridge. I passed over this bridge on my motorcycle several years ago. We stayed overnight at the Port of Little Current. Tied up next to us was a 1944 Ville-class Canadian tug named Bonneville, and we became friends with the owners, Randy and Sharon. They volunteered to buddy boat with us the following day and show us some of the cool anchorages in the area. Bob and I jumped at the opportunity. After buying some groceries the next morning, we followed Bonneville out of the marina. Georgian Bay was now behind us as we headed into the area called the North Channel. There were locks far ahead of us, southwest of the Chicago area. These locks were scheduled to be closed for a few weeks in late September for maintenance. In order to get past these locks before they closed, we would have to pick up our pace significantly, which would severely limit our ability to explore the beautiful North Channel area. We stopped for an hour or so at South Benjamin Island. This was an exceptionally nice anchorage, and during our brief stay, Randy took Bob and I for a dinghy tour of the anchorage. Although Bob tends to be a little camera shy, I don't think there is 1 ounce of shy blood in Randy's body.
I want to make sure the FBI has a really good picture of you.
Am I going to be in one of your videos?
Of course, no visit to Bonneville is complete without meeting Maggie the Wonder Dog. We continued to follow Bonneville through the afternoon, and Randy took us to another exceptionally nice anchorage for the night. When I saw how narrow the entrance was into this anchorage, my only thought was, Randy, you have got to be kidding. But although it has a very narrow entrance, it had reasonably good water depths throughout the entrance. We finished off the evening with a sunset tour in Randy's dinghy. Then everyone came over to my boat for some conversation and a couple Slow Bill's YouTube videos. The view of the Milky Way from the anchorage was absolutely fabulous. In the morning, we said goodbye to Randy, Sharon, and Molly the Wonder Dog and squeezed past that narrow anchorage entrance once again. Our last night in Canada was spent tied up to the government dock at Cockburn Island. Cockburn Island is one of those places that qualifies for the phrase, it may not be the middle of nowhere, but you can see it from there. We got a very early start the next morning to avoid stronger winds that were forecast for later in the day. By lunchtime, we were tied up in Detour Village, Michigan. It was here that we cleared customs. In addition to your passports, boaters from the USA need to be sure you get a customs sticker like this for your boat before entering Canada. You will need it when you check back into the USA. In 2019, USA boaters were able to clear customs back into the U.S. by using an app on your cell phone called CBP Roam. When you arrive back in the USA, you type all the required information for the captain and crew and boat into the app. As part of this process, the app will ask you to take a cell phone photograph of everyone's passport. Then you and your crew will use the cell phone to do a video chat with the U.S. Customs officer. This video chat was required so the officer could match the passport photographs with the video image of the people he was actually talking to. This officially ended our trip through Georgian Bay and the North Channel. I hope when you pass through here, you were able to spend a lot more time than we did exploring this beautiful area. I hope you enjoyed the portion of the video through the Georgian Bay and North Channel. Coming up next, we will be on the road to Chicago down the eastern shoreline of Lake Michigan. And from what I hear, there's not an awful lot of difference between boating on Lake Michigan and boating on the Atlantic Ocean. It sounds like it can really get rowdy out there, but we will find out. Later.